Blighted or underutilized properties in Marietta into residential living space is making strides toward the redevelopment of its first piece of land. Our Chase Campbell has more.
The Southeast Ohio Port Authority started work on its residential revitalization program 2 years ago with the purchase of 605 Pearl Street. The property was once the site of a controversial house, sometimes called the Compound, which neighbors said was a site of frequent criminal activity and a threat to the community. The house was torn down last year, and now Port Authority Executive Director Jesse Roush says they're taking the next step to determining how to proceed with development.
At this point, we're ready to engage some engineers and consultants to develop a site plan to see how many units can we actually get on that footprint, and would it make sense to potentially acquire some more property so that we can really maximize the footprint there and bring as many new units to Marietta as possible.
Once this initial planning stage is complete, Roush says they'll be able to proceed with more concrete decisions that get them closer to moving dirt and building something new.
That's a pretty quick turnaround from an engineering standpoint, and then the goal from there would be to continue conversations that we're having with potential financial partners, with potential builders, and ultimately we can use that to issue a request for qualifications and try to find the right partner.
Roush says the site plan will help them decide whether to focus on developing the property as it exists now or try to purchase more of the surrounding properties to have a bigger plot to work with.
Two takes on the property. One is what we currently own and how many units can we actually get physically on that property, and then ideally if we were able to aggregate a little additional acreage, could we get up to 8, 10, or 12 units, and that will give us a sense of, is that plausible, and if so, would we want to work with some of our neighbors to make some acquisitions.
As the Port Authority continues development on the Pearl Street property, Roush says they're also giving their attention to other sites throughout the city.
I think one of the most important steps that we've made is finding potential partners, and we have some property over on Buckeye Avenue, and we were able to work with a redeveloper out of Zanesville who made one of the acquisitions next to one of our parcels over there. That'll actually take a former abandoned and vacant blighted property, and he's going to be bringing that back online. So that partnership was perfect, and we're grateful to have his investment in Marietta.
They're also looking at redevelopment on Muskingum Drive.
There has been a little bit of traction on Muskingum Drive. The same partner we're working with on Buckeye Avenue has made some acquisitions over there. They're in the process of redeveloping some of those homes and bringing them back up to standard with code and zoning. So we're optimistic about that progress and hopes that it will trickle out through the rest of the development there.
In Marietta, Chase Campbell, WTAP News.
New tonight, a former assistant middle school track